rumor the NBA does not want to hear? The rumor sounds impossible, almost ridiculous, almost too wild to say out loud. Victor Wembanyama, the NBA's most untouchable young superstar, could one day walk away from America and return to Europe. And yet, after what happened in San Antonio, people are no longer laughing it off, because this was not just another finals loss. This was not just another superstar getting frustrated after coming up short. This was Victor Wembanyama, the player the league has quietly prepared to become its next global face, walking straight into the tunnel while the New York Knicks celebrated an NBA championship on his floor. No long goodbye, no emotional handshake line, no clean television moment, just his back, the tunnel, and a silence loud enough to shake the entire league. The Knicks had just ended a 53-year championship drought. Their players were rushing the court, their fans were losing their minds, and cameras should have been locked on New York's historic celebration. But instead, one image hijacked the night: Wembanyama leaving before the moment was finished. That was when the whispers started getting loud. Not just, was that poor sportsmanship? Not just, did he disrespect the Knicks? The real question became much bigger and much more dangerous. Does Victor Wembanyama truly want everything that comes with being the face of the NBA? Because Wembanyama is different. He is not a product of the American basketball machine. He was formed in France, raised inside the European game, shaped by a different basketball culture, and still deeply connected to the country and continent that built him. For most NBA stars, Europe is a place they visit in the summer. For Victor, Europe is part of his identity. That is why this rumor has power. A normal player walking off the court creates a debate. Wembanyama walking off the court creates a global question. Could the pressure, the criticism, the injuries, the nonstop NBA spotlight, and the emotional pull of France eventually push him toward a different future? On paper, it sounds insane. The Spurs can offer him a massive contract. San Antonio can build an entire franchise around him. The NBA can turn him into one of the biggest sports icons on earth. But money does not answer everything. Fame does not heal everything, and pressure has a way of exposing what a player truly wants when the lights become too hot. That tunnel walk may have looked like one emotional moment after one painful loss, but in reality, it may have revealed the first crack in the NBA's perfect plan for Victor Wembanyama. Was he simply heartbroken, or was this the first sign that the league's future face might not be fully comfortable living inside the league's machine? That is the part nobody in San Antonio wants to say out loud. Because if Wembanyama ever starts thinking seriously about Europe again, it would not just change the Spurs. It would change the balance of global basketball. So before anyone calls this rumor impossible, look at the clues. The finals heartbreak, the media firestorm, his French roots, his connection to EuroLeague basketball, his injury history, and the pressure of carrying an entire franchise before he has even reached his prime. This story is not about one missed handshake. It is about a superstar standing at the center of money, legacy, identity, health, and loyalty. And the scariest part for the NBA is simple. Victor Wembanyama may have more options than anyone wants to admit. If you are watching from New York, type 1 the comments. If you are watching from San Antonio, type 2. If you believe Victor was wrong for leaving the court, type 3. But if you think the media is overreacting and he was just crushed by the moment, type 4. And make sure you subscribe, because this rumor may be the beginning of the biggest Wembanyama story yet. The backlash hit like a storm. The moment Victor Wembanyama disappeared into that tunnel, the game was over. But the real fight had just started. Within minutes, social media turned into a courtroom. Clips of him walking away spread everywhere. Some fans slowed the footage down. Others circled the moment Jalen Brunson appeared ready for a post-game gesture. Then came the captions. The hot takes, the angry replies, and the same accusation repeated again and again. The future face of the NBA had failed his first major test of leadership. That is what made the backlash so intense. This was not some bench player having a bad emotional moment. This was Victor Wembanyama, the superstar the league had been selling as the next global basketball king. He was supposed to be different, taller, smarter, more mature, more graceful under pressure. But on the biggest night of his career, with the whole country watching, he gave the critics an image they could use against him forever. Draymond Green did not treat it like a small mistake. He saw it as a sign of mental defeat. To Draymond, a leader stays even when it hurts. A leader absorbs the pain, looks the champion in the eye, and walks away with dignity. Stephen A. Smith pushed the controversy even louder, turning one tunnel walk into a national debate about respect, maturity, and whether Wembanyama was ready to carry the NBA's biggest spotlight. Then Nick Young added the word that made everything explode: crybaby. That word traveled faster than any highlight from the finals. It was short, brutal, and perfect for the internet. Suddenly, People who had spent years calling Wembanyama a once-in-a-lifetime alien were now questioning his toughness. Not his talent, not his ceiling, his toughness. And in the NBA, that kind of criticism sticks. But not everyone agreed. Jay Williams pushed back, arguing that people were pretending post-game handshakes were some sacred law. To him, Wembanyama was not disrespecting basketball. He was a young superstar crushed by a championship loss, reacting in a raw, human way. And that defense mattered because the debate was no longer about etiquette. It was about interpretation. Was Victor arrogant or was he devastated? Was he disrespectful or was he overwhelmed? Was he showing weakness or was he showing how badly he wanted to win? That gray area is what made the story so powerful. Because depending on which side you were on, the same walk meant two completely different things. To critics, it proved Wembanyama was not ready to be the face of the league. To defenders, it proved he cared so much that losing broke him in real time. But behind the screaming debate, another question started forming quietly. If this is what happens when Wembanyama loses in America, if every emotional reaction becomes a character trial, if every mistake becomes a national referendum, how long before that pressure starts pushing him away? That is why the EuroLeague rumor suddenly felt different. Before the finals, it sounded like fantasy. After the finals, it started to sound like a warning. Because Europe would not erase pressure, but it would offer a different kind of pressure. A different rhythm, a different basketball culture, a place where Wembanyama's roots are not a side note, but the center of the story. And that is what should scare the Spurs. The backlash was not just noise. It was the first time America looked at Victor Wembanyama and did not see only the miracle. It saw the flaws. It saw the frustration. It saw the pressure. And maybe, for the first time, Victor saw exactly what being the NBA's chosen one was going to cost him: the finals loss that refused to die. The reason this story did not disappear after one news cycle is simple. The Spurs did not just lose the finals. They lost the finals they kept holding in their hands. That is the part that makes Wembanyama's reaction so much easier to understand and so much harder to defend. San Antonio was not destroyed by the Knicks from start to finish. They were not embarrassed by a clearly superior team. They were right there, again and again, controlling large pieces of the series, building leads, quieting the noise, giving their fans every reason to believe the championship was coming home. And then, every time the moment tightened, the floor seemed to shrink around them. Game after game, the Spurs found themselves ahead. Double-digit leads, long stretches of dominance, defensive possessions where Wembanyama looked like he was blocking out the sun, offensive bursts where San Antonio looked younger, faster, and more talented than New York. But the Knicks had something the Spurs did not have yet: late-game scar tissue, veteran calm, and a refusal to panic when the building started shaking. That is why the loss haunted Victor. When you get blown out, you can tell yourself the other team was simply better. You can accept the gap. You can go into the summer knowing exactly what needs to change. But when you keep leading and still lose, the pain becomes different. It becomes personal. It becomes mental. It becomes the kind of defeat that replays in your head at 3 a.m. One missed rotation, one rush shot, one bad possession, one loose rebound. One moment where the future face of the league looked like he was still learning how cruel the finals can be. And that is exactly what critics attacked. They did not say Wembanyama lacked talent. Nobody with eyes could say that. They said he lacked a final layer, the killer calm, the emotional control, the ability to stand in the fire when a championship was slipping away and still look unshaken. That is a heavy accusation for any player. For a 22-year-old carrying an entire franchise, it becomes almost unfair. But the NBA has never been fair to chosen ones. LeBron learned that, Durant learned that, Giannis learned that. Every superstar who gets crowned early eventually discovers the crown comes with teeth. For Wembanyama, this finals was that discovery. The Knicks won the title, but the Spurs lost something more complicated than a trophy. They lost the innocence of believing talent alone would carry them through June. They learned that history does not care how young you are, how special you are, or how many scouts called you the future. In the finals, the game only cares who finishes, and when Victor walked into that tunnel, maybe he was not only running from the Knicks' celebration, maybe he was running from the reality that greatness was going to demand more from him than block shots, highlights, and regular season dominance. That is why this defeat matters so much, because it did not end when the buzzer sounded. It followed him into the locker room. It followed him onto every sports show in America. And now it follows him into the biggest question of his career. Does he want to keep chasing NBA immortality, or is there another version of basketball calling his name? The European roots America forgot. To understand why the EuroLeague rumor keeps coming back, you have to understand something American fans sometimes ignore. Victor Wembanyama did not arrive in the NBA as a blank canvas. He arrived with a basketball identity already built. Before San Antonio, before the draft spotlight, before every arena in America treated him like a touring phenomenon, Wembanyama belonged to France. He learned the game through European spacing, European discipline, European patience. He was not raised in a system built around mixtape culture and instant celebrity. He was raised in a world where the game moves through reads, timing, structure, and collective intelligence. That matters because when people say, why would he ever leave the NBA? They are assuming the NBA is the only dream that matters. For many players, maybe it is. But for Victor, the story is more layered. Europe is not some backup plan. It is where the first version of him was created. He played for Asvel, the club connected to Tony Parker, one of France's greatest basketball icons. Then he made the move to Metropolitans '92, a decision that looked like preparation for the NBA, but also revealed something important. Wembanyama wanted control. He wanted the right environment. He wanted minutes, freedom, development, and a team that understood the unique challenge of building around a player the world had never seen before. That decision was not just about leaving EuroLeague competition, it was about choosing the path that fit him, and that is where the current rumor becomes dangerous. If Wembanyama was willing to make a bold move before the NBA to protect his development, why would anyone assume he would never make another bold move later to protect his body, his identity, or his happiness? This is the part San Antonio fans do not want to think about. Victor has always been comfortable making decisions that confuse outsiders. He does not move like a typical American superstar. He does not seem obsessed with playing the celebrity game. He talks about basketball like a craft. He talks about France like a responsibility. He talks about growth like something deeper than fame. That does not mean he wants to leave the Spurs now, but it does mean his relationship with the NBA is not simple. For the league, Wembanyama is a product, a global centerpiece, a future marketing machine. For the Spurs, he is the foundation of a dynasty they are desperate to build. For fans, he is entertainment, hope, fear, and debate all at once. But for Victor himself, basketball may still be something more private, more personal, and more connected to where he came from. That is why the EuroLeague conversation has emotional weight. It is not about rejecting America. It is about whether America can give him the kind of basketball life he truly wants. Because Europe does not just represent home. It represents rhythm, culture, national pride, a different relationship with the game. And after the finals, after the criticism, after that tunnel walk became a national controversy, the pull of that world suddenly became louder. France is not a side story. The biggest mistake people make when talking about Wembanyama is treating France like a detail. It is not a detail. It is central to him. For some NBA stars, national team basketball is an occasional summer event, a nice honor, a chance to win a medal. For Wembanyama, representing France carries a different emotional weight. He has spoken about it with a seriousness that does not feel manufactured. When he talks about the French national team, it does not sound like a brand statement. It sounds like a promise. That is why his absences from international competition matter. Every time his NBA responsibilities or health concerns keep him away from France, the tension grows. He wants to be there. He wants to compete. He wants to win with his country. But the NBA calendar, the Spurs' priorities, and the physical demands placed on his body keep creating conflict. That conflict is not small. Imagine being told you are the future of basketball, but every step deeper into that future pulls you farther away from the place that made you. Imagine being celebrated globally while also feeling like your own national basketball mission is being delayed. That is the emotional space Wembanyama lives in. And it creates a question that no contract can fully answer. What does he want his career to mean? In America, the answer is usually simple. Championships, MVPs, max contracts, shoe deals, legacy debates, rings on rings on rings. But Wembanyama's story may not fit that box perfectly. His legacy could also include France. It could include reshaping how European players think about power. It could include proving that the NBA is not the only place where a generational player can define greatness. That idea sounds radical only because the NBA has trained fans to see itself as the final destination. But Wembanyama's existence challenges that. He is global in a way very few players have ever been. He is not just an NBA star from France. He is a French basketball force temporarily operating inside the NBA system. And if that system ever starts feeling too restrictive, too damaging, or too disconnected from the parts of basketball he values most, Europe becomes more than nostalgia. It becomes leverage. That is why the Spurs have to be careful. They cannot treat Victor like just another franchise player. They cannot assume money alone will satisfy him. They cannot assume the American spotlight is automatically the dream. They have to understand the full person, not just the 7'4" superstar blocking shots and selling jerseys. Because France is still there, EuroLeague is still there, the national team is still there. And every time Victor says he wants to represent his country, he is reminding the NBA that his heart is not owned by one league. The finals loss did not create that truth. It exposed it. The body behind the legend. Every conversation about Victor Wembanyama eventually comes back to one uncomfortable truth. His talent looks unlimited, but his body has already been asked to carry an impossible load. He is not just tall, he is historically tall, unusually mobile, and expected to move like a guard while protecting the rim like an entire defense by himself. That kind of body creates wonder, but it also creates risk. And for Wembanyama, that risk is not theoretical anymore. His young NBA career has already included serious health concerns, and that changes the way people look at his future. Fans want highlights. The Spurs want wins. The NBA wants a global superstar, but Victor has to live inside the body that makes all of it possible. That is why the EuroLeague rumor keeps finding oxygen. The NBA schedule is brutal. Long travel, back-to-backs, media pressure, playoff intensity, and the expectation that a franchise player must always be available. For most stars, that is exhausting. For Wembanyama, it could become career-defining. Europe would not be easy. EuroLeague basketball is physical, tactical, and intense. But the rhythm is different. The schedule is shorter, the travel is different. The lifestyle may offer more control. For a player who needs to protect a once-in-history body, that difference matters. This does not mean Victor is weak. It means he may be smart enough to understand that greatness is not only about how high you climb, it is also about how long you can stay there. And that is what should worry the Spurs. If every season adds more pressure, more pain, and more sacrifice, Europe may stop looking like a memory and start looking like a strategy. The $300 million question. The biggest reason people dismiss the EuroLeague rumor is money. And honestly, they have a point. The Spurs can put a massive contract in front of Victor Wembanyama, possibly worth around $300 million. For most players, that ends the conversation immediately. But with Victor, the conversation is not that simple. Yes, he will probably sign. Yes, San Antonio will likely do everything possible to keep him. And yes, the NBA still offers the biggest stage, the biggest money, and the strongest global spotlight. But the real question is not only whether Wembanyama signs, the real question is how much control he demands when he does. That is where a player option becomes important. If his deal allows him to choose his future while still in his prime, then the contract is not a cage. It becomes a bridge. He can take the money, keep building with the Spurs, and still protect the right to decide what comes next. That matters because Wembanyama is not a normal franchise player. He is a global basketball figure with unusual leverage. The Spurs cannot just offer money and expect that to solve everything. They must offer a real plan, protect his health, build a championship roster, respect his connection to France, and give him a voice in his own future. Because if Victor signs but still feels trapped by pressure, injuries, or organizational failure, the contract will not end the rumors. It will only start the countdown. Can the Spurs keep their future? The Spurs now have one mission. Prove to Victor Wembanyama that San Antonio is not just where his NBA story began, but where his legacy should be built. That will not be easy. The finals loss changed everything. Before it, the Spurs were the young miracle, the team ahead of schedule, the future arriving early. After it, they became the team that got close enough to touch a championship and still watch the Knicks celebrate on their floor. That kind of loss can create a dynasty, or it can create cracks. History has warned us before. Young teams can look unstoppable and still never return to the finals. Talent is not enough. The Spurs need the right veterans, the right guards, the right shooting, the right medical plan, and the right emotional balance around Victor. They cannot ask him to save the franchise every night and then act surprised when the pressure becomes too heavy. San Antonio has advantages. It is a stable organization with history and patience. But Wembanyama's timeline is not normal. When a player is this great this early, the world expects championships immediately. Every season without a ring becomes louder. Every failure becomes personal. That is why Europe remains in the background. Not because Victor is planning to leave right now, but because it gives him another identity and another option. If the Spurs fail to protect him, support him, or build properly around him, he has a world outside the NBA that already understands his roots. So can the Spurs keep their future? Yes, but they have to earn it every season, not only with money, but with trust. The EuroLeague earthquake. If Victor Wembanyama ever returned to Europe in his prime, it would not be just another transfer. It would be a basketball earthquake. For decades, the NBA has been seen as the final destination. Europe develops stars, and the NBA collects them. That is how the system has worked, but Wembanyama could challenge that entire idea. Not now, maybe not during his next contract, maybe not for years. But if the injuries continue, if the pressure grows, if the Spurs fail to win, and if France keeps pulling at him emotionally, then the impossible starts to look possible. And if it happened, the message would be huge. It would tell young European stars that the NBA does not have to own the entire dream. It would tell EuroLeague clubs that global superstardom can exist outside America. It would tell basketball fans that greatness can choose culture, control, and identity over the biggest machine. That is why the NBA would panic. Wembanyama is not just famous, he is symbolic. He represents the future of basketball, international, skilled, positionless, and impossible to define. If a player like that ever decided the NBA was not his only path, the entire power balance of global basketball would feel it. Of course, Europe would not be an escape from pressure. It would bring a different kind of pressure. Every arena would treat him like a historic event. Every opponent would want to prove something. Every game would become a statement. But that is what makes the rumor fascinating. This is not about avoiding pressure. It is about choosing which pressure feels meaningful. And after the finals, the NBA can no longer pretend the question is ridiculous. What Wembanyama must learn now. The truth is, Victor Wembanyama does not need to leave the NBA to prove he is different. He also does not need to stay forever just to satisfy the league's expectations. What he needs now is wisdom. His talent is no longer the question. Everyone knows he can change games in ways that almost no player in history can. He can protect the rim, stretch the floor, handle the ball, and bend the court around him. But greatness is not only about gifts, it is about how a player handles pain, pressure, criticism, and failure. The finals loss may become one of the most important moments of his career. Not because he lost, but because of what he does next. He has to learn how to lose without letting one emotional reaction define him. He has to learn how to lead when the cameras are still rolling and his heart is broken. That is part of becoming the face of a franchise. But the NBA and the Spurs must learn something too. Wembanyama is not a machine. He is a person with roots, health concerns, national pride, and a basketball identity bigger than one league. If San Antonio wants to keep him long-term, the franchise must protect him, support him, build around him, and respect the full picture of who he is. Maybe Victor signs the massive contract, stays with the Spurs, returns to the finals, and becomes the champion everyone expects. Maybe the EuroLeague rumor fades away, but maybe years from now, people will look back at that walk into the tunnel as the first sign that his story was never going to follow the script America wrote for him. The lesson is simple. Greatness is not only about choosing the biggest stage, it is about choosing the right path. If you think Wembanyama should stay in the NBA and finish his mission with the Spurs, type 1" the comments. If you think he should one day return to Europe and build a different kind of legacy, type 2. If you think the media overreacted to the tunnel walk, type 3. And if you believe this finals loss will make him stronger, type 4. Do not forget to like this video, share it with another NBA fan, and subscribe to the channel, because Victor Wembanyama's story is only getting started.